Yo, guys, it's Hart going over the $1 million winning lineup for Week 8 on DraftKings, doing a recap of that, as well as the Week 9 early look, break down some early look core plays. Let's get into it. So before we get into it, if you guys just hit that like button and subscribe, would really appreciate it. It really helps out my channel. But yeah, this is the lineup that took down $1 million to first place. BS Golfer 7 took it down, and it was the first week where we saw pretty much every play is super low owned. That took down the $1 million to first place. So if you guys have kind of been following the channel, the recaps, or just the Million Maker winning lineups, the first 7 weeks, 8 weeks of, the first 7 weeks of the season, it's been a pretty simple formula where you play kind of the top 6 to 7 chalkiest guys in your lineup, and all you had to do to get different was get different in 1 or 2 spots. The defenses have really helped out so far in terms of scoring the season. It seems if you nail the defense and you kind of nail those chalky spots, you're going to have a really good day. And that's kind of what the first few weeks have been like. It's pretty much been the exact same formula. You follow the chalk, get different in 1 or 2 spots, and you have the ability to take down the $1 million first. This week it was different. We had kind of a shift in the lineup build where we got that news that Nico Collins and Christian Kirk were out. So we were dealing with a bunch of 3K wide receivers on the Texans, which made it easier for people to jam in CMC, Bijan, and Jonathan Taylor into the same lineup and kind of feel good about it. And so that's the route a lot of people went, either jamming in all 3 or jamming in 2 of them. And they obviously, when CMC and Bijan fail and have really, really bad games, that's going to kill half the lineups in this Million Maker, just because I think Bijan was 54% owned. I think CMC was like 30, if not 40. So when those guys, have that ownership and they go out and get you less than 10 fantasy points, it's going to absolutely nuke your chances of having a good game, and it's going to obviously raise your chances of lineups like this taking it down. So this is the first week where we've seen a very, very low owned lineup taking it down, and they took it down by 13. Usually it's a couple points that these lineups win by. This one was by 13, 230, which is, I guess, relatively low scoring compared to the previous week. So it was just super interesting, kind of the lineup path and kind of what led to this. But Tua going against Atlanta, James Cook, I talked about at length in my videos how I absolutely loved him in the spot against Carolina. Had an amazing game there, so hopefully you guys followed my advice there. In terms of Breece Hall, this one was interesting. He was projected for like 20+% ownership, or kind of around that mark by everyone in the industry. And he only came in at 6.4% ownership. As I mentioned, kind of that late week news of the Texans kind of made everyone hop off the 6K range for the running backs. And as you can see, it was the key to the slate was getting on these 6K running backs and getting off those super chalky CMC Bijan running backs. But yeah, he had a massive game there. Had a huge comeback against the Bengals there. First win of the season. Michael Pittman Jr., kind of the same ownership the past 2 weeks, but another really good game there against Tennessee. Jalen Waddle, obviously a skinny stack there with Tua. Xavier Hutchinson, one of those Texans wide receivers that made sense to get into one of them. Most people went to Schultz or they went to Noel or Higgins, but it was Hutchinson who had the best game of the group. Noel had a decent game as well. Schultz was like the massive chalk that failed at tight end. But yeah, talked about George Kittle too. Surprised he was that low owned. Would have expected him more so in that 10 to 12% range for tight ends. He had a decent game there, a nice bounce back spot. I called that out. And then obviously Jonathan Taylor, one of the chalkier running backs, the third chalkiest running back, smash spot against Tennessee. And once again, he absolutely nuked them for his best game of the season. So yeah, as you can see, he only had 2 players above 10% ownership. Everyone else was extremely low owned, and it helped out, the Bills in a good spot there against the Andy Dalton Panthers. They did good as well. So that was the winning lineup. Very interesting to see here for Week 8. And then Week 9 is kind of shaping up to be, I wouldn't say the same, but there's some good value. And as I say in these early core play videos, I'm going to be touching on kind of some of my favorite plays through each position. I'm not going to be able to touch on everyone just because I don't want this video to be 20 minutes long. I'm going to try to keep these a lot more concise and kind of just focus in on some specific players and people and why. But in terms of the slates, we get Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes at the top, 7,300, 7,100. I think both look great here. We know that these games turn into cinema. It's huge revenge spots for Josh Allen here, just because every time they have a good season, they always get defeated by Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs. So in terms of legacy, this is a big legacy game for Josh Allen. Obviously, it's not the playoffs, but still, This team has kind of been fraudulent in terms of the receivers, the offense, and the defense has been bad. So we interested to see how the Bills stack up against the Chiefs. Because the Chiefs, with everyone kind of fully healthy now, we did just get news Isaiah Pacheco is out, but that doesn't really matter too much just because they really haven't had a rushing game there. It's been pretty non-existent, so it's not like it's a massive news that's going to affect the team. They're able to kind of fill in people there regardless, and Patrick Mahomes has really kind of been the running back for this team so far. But yeah, in terms of quarterbacks, Patrick Mahomes looks amazing. Josh Allen looks like a decent contrarian spend-up. If you want to go to him on kind of a revenge game narrative for him, if you want to say that. But yeah, Patrick Mahomes, as I said, the Chiefs are back. It's frustrating for everyone who's not a Chiefs fan. I'm not, so it is frustrating that they're back. But yeah, he's playing at MVP level. Good spot here against Buffalo. A really kind of fraudulent defense. Absolutely love me some Patrick Mahomes. And we got news that Isaiah Pacheco is out, so we'll have some value to pair Patrick Mahomes with to help spend it up in other areas. In terms of some other quarterbacks, I will call out Herbert against Tennessee. I will say that could be a Kamani Vidal spot, but yeah, we just saw what the Colts did to Tennessee and what pretty much every team has done to Tennessee this season. It's been a smash spot for those players. So I do like targeting Justin Herbert and his pass catchers, especially Kamani Vidal, the running back. Drake May, we just got to talk about him real fast. Been playing amazing, but I will say I want to pump the brakes a little bit. I know we should give him his flowers. He's been really, really good in year 2, but still, look at the teams he's playing. Cleveland, Tennessee, New Orleans. I will say Buffalo, but as I said, they're kind of fraudulent. And then the Panthers. So, I mean, 4 out of the 5 teams there are... 4 out of the 5 teams there, really, really bad. One, we don't know if the Bills are good or bad. They're kind of up and down every week. So I'll say pump the brakes a little bit. But yeah, Drake May has been really, really good. So he's a fine contrarian option. Moving on down a little bit more, Puka should be back. So Stafford going against New Orleans. He looks really good there at 6,300. Danny Dimes, his price really hasn't moved. He's just been super, super consistent. Going against the Pittsburgh defense has been very, very fraudulent, especially the secondary. They've been letting, I think the past 5 weeks, they've let up like the best, passing yards per game for quarterbacks the past 5 weeks. They're letting, so like the opposing quarterback going against the Pittsburgh defense, they've been throwing for their best, passing yards game of the season. The past 5 weeks against Tennessee. Against Pittsburgh. So that's a defense we do like to target. Obviously, we know we can pair him with a good amount of people. So Daniel Dimes, Danny Jones, it looks really, really good. Moving on down a little bit more, Jared Goff, 6,000, playing at home against Minnesota, who's been bad. JJ McCarthy's back. He's been bad. The offense could struggle. It could be one of those things where Jared Goff has a really good game there. He usually does at home. I think he averages like mid to low 20s fantasy points compared to on the road. He averages like mid-teens. So I have a good amount of interest in Jared Goff. Moving down a little bit more, I will call out Caleb Williams, 2 really bad games back to back, but they are going against Cincinnati. That's just a team you want to target because they've been brutal. Trey Hendrickson might miss again. So, yeah, they're just very depleted and bad. And you can make the same argument for Joe Flacco. 2 really good weeks in a row. Good spot here against Bears defense. So, kind of the middle tier. They both look pretty solid. I do like Brock Purdy, 5,500, if he is good to go in the spot. And then some 2 other guys I will mention are going to be Jackson Dart here, 5,200, just because of that rushing upside. They should be down. He should be throwing the ball a ton. And then could you get to, where do you go? JJ McCarthy, sure. I just don't love it. I just don't think there's really a need to. If you're going to get to kind of a cheaper quarterback, I'd say you go with, I think, Brock Purdy would be my favorite, or Jackson Dart. But I will call out Geno Smith. Absolutely god-awful, but he's 4,600, so very, very cheap. Brock Bowers might be back. So Brock Bowers, Jacoby Myers, he has the pass catchers. We've seen upside. If he goes for 20, that's really all you need at 4,600, and that allows you to pay up for other players in really good spots. So I will call that out. We've seen a few times this season where that's worked out in terms of the winning lineup, taking down $1 million at first place. You can just do a skinny stack, Geno, Brock Bowers, and feel good about it if, they have a really good game. So I will call that out. They're going against Jacksonville, a good defense, but if they're down, Geno Smith has the ability to go for 20. It's been very, very bad. He's been really, really bad. I'm just saying in terms of DFS, you can't just completely write them off just because of how bad they've been. when, he's very, very cheap and he has some decent pass catchers to throw to. In terms of running back, the top three, once again, are all firmly in play. Obviously, we know Jonathan Taylor, MVP level. CMC and Bijan coming off of really, really bad games, bounce back spots for them. So if you want to fit them in, I don't mind it at all. I think I'm preferring getting to kind of the second range, the second tier for running backs. Gibbs, Jacobs, Kyron Williams, all looking really, really good here in the spot. Obviously, Gibbs going against Minnesota. Absolutely love that. 8,000. Doesn't matter the game script. He's heavily involved. Josh Jacobs, same thing. We just saw what James Cook did to the Carolina Panthers. Now we get Josh Jacobs coming off of another week of a few more days of getting healthier, where they didn't really need him too much in that game against the Pittsburgh Steelers. So he looks good there. James Cook, more so contrarian play. Like if you think the Bills' offense is going to do good, as I keep mentioning, it's going to be because of James Cook. Kyron Williams gets a good spot against New Orleans. Cavani Madal gets a smash spot here against the Titans. If you're not going to the pass catchers for the Chargers, I think you should go to Vidal there. We know what the Titans are. They're terrible, and the running backs have done really, really good against the Titans team. So really like Cavani Vidal this week. I think, DeAndre Swift is, decently safe option there. He's just going to just be heavily involved in offense. I'll call out Chase Brown. I mentioned it last week. He's kind of coming back to life. Had a really good game there, 25.5 fantasy points. Gets a great spot against the Bears. So I do have a lot of interest in him. I will call it Rico Dowdle. I think they're finally going to give him a bulk or most of the carries. And then Chuba is going to see probably, I'd say 30%. I would expect Rico to see 70%. I think it's finally going to happen based on the coach speak from Dave Canales. Moving on a little bit more. Warren, have some interest in him and kind of just like a negative game script where he could be that pass catching back. I will call it Woody Marks. He's looked really good the past 2 weeks, been heavily involved. It seems like he's kind of fully taken over the backfield there for the Texans, even though they'll still continue to keep, what's his name? Nick Chubb involved. Mind blank for a second, but yeah, I do like Woody Marks as like a cheaper value play. 400 should get a good amount of work. Tyrone Tracy Jr. with no Cam Skattebo, he should be really good here at 5,100 as kind of that main back. As you saw the first 2 weeks, like he is involved. Like he's going to be in that Cam Skattebo role. So a good value play there. And then Brashad Smith and Kareem Hunt with no Pacheco. I know it doesn't say it yet, but Pacheco will be out. Kareem Hunt, when they get to the red zone, they'll punch it in. But I think most of the field work will be with Brashad Smith, who's been heavily involved in the passing game. I expect him to get more rushing attempts, rookie running back. He looks really good as value play, so we'll jam him in there. And we'll just throw in Tyrone Tracy as well at 5,100 in that, Giants backfield. You can definitely do a skinny stack with Dart and Tyrone Tracy Jr. I don't mind that at all. Moving on to the wide receivers, Puka is back, smash spot against New Orleans. Absolutely love that for him. Jamar Chase, obviously, if you haven't kind of noticed, the past 4 weeks, just look at the targets, 10, 12, 23, 19. I think he's leading targets for wide receivers the past 4 weeks by like 30 compared to the second highest, which is Ladd McConkey. We'll get to him in a second. But yeah, Jamar Chase, great spin up, very, very safe. If you're not getting to... I would say if you're not getting to Jahmyr Gibbs, Amon-Ra looks like a great play. I just can't really trust Justin Jefferson right now with JJ throwing the ball. Rashee Rice, obviously, playing Patrick Mahomes, he's the top main priority. So I want to get to him there in that matchup against Buffalo. Obviously, if we're going to Patrick Mahomes, it makes sense to go to him. And we obviously get the kind of the sour relief value play there at Brashad Smith, who's involved in the passing game, should be involved in the running game as well. Moving on down a little bit more with Puka back. Don't love the price tag there of Devonta Adams. I will mention Patrick Surtain is out a few weeks, so Nico Collins does look really good here at 7,100, even though we haven't really seen huge upside from him yet this season in terms of CJ Stroud throwing the ball. So could it finally be the breakout week for Nico Collins if he's back? Yes. No Patrick Surtain to deal with. Moving on down a little bit more, as I called out, Ladd McConkey has been the wide receiver 2 in terms of targets, most targets the past 3 weeks, just behind Jamar Chase. And when I say just behind, like 20 behind. But yeah, Ladd has been heavily involved the past 3 weeks, even with Quentin Johnson back. So I do have interest in here in a smash spot against Tennessee. Pittman Jr., once again, looks very, very safe and a really strong play. Moving on down a little bit more, Keenan Allen Quentin Johnson, they look good against Tennessee. DK Metcalf is like a nice bring back option. He's going to be heavily involved, the main pass catcher there for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Jacoby Myers, as I mentioned, if you want to go to Geno Smith, you could. Jacoby's pretty cheap. Shakir, I guess a fine option there for the Bills. Now we get to some of the cheaper plays. Rashid Shaheed, always a viable dart throw in tournaments. Moving on down a little bit more, I really like Jameson Williams. Not really involved past 2 out of 3 weeks, especially last week. Didn't even get a single target. Expect him to bounce back here. So I do have a good amount of interest in him, especially if you're not going to Gibbs, you're not going to Amon-Ra. I think it makes sense to target him. They're going to be getting him involved. Coming off a game where you get 0 targets, they paid him a ton of money. I expect them to get involved early here for this game. Moving on down a little bit more, I don't think there's really anyone else kind of sticking out too much here. As I mentioned, this is early in the week, so things could obviously change. But let's get over to the tight end situation and kind of wrap up this video. Tucker Kraft finally being priced about right, and he's finally getting involved. As I kind of complained about with these Green Bay Packers wide receivers, we've talked about at length how Tucker Kraft has been great at yards to catch. It's just the Packers have not thrown the ball. Finally, the past 2 weeks they have, and they've done really, really well, and he's done really, really well, as you can see. So Tucker Kraft, once again, firmly involved. You just kind of hope that this continues in terms of those targets, which I will say are not always guaranteed in terms of the Packers, especially if it turns into Josh Jacobs' game. Tucker Kraft can only get 4 to 5 catches, and it could hurt you at that price tag of $5,700. Tyler Warren, always in play there for the Colts. Obviously, a great target option. And then Gadsden, a guy who's really blown up the past 3 weeks. And it's been interesting because Quentin Johnston's been back. Quentin Johnston's kind of that main wide receiver. And then since he got hurt, it was Ladd and Keenan kind of taking over. And then Gadsden is kind of that third option who's kind of essentially become the first option. So that's kind of why I like going to Kamani Vidal over the pass catchers for Tennessee, just because you don't really know who is the main target guy. Like in terms of routes run, Quentin Johnston's overall profile of the routes he's run have really shifted. The first few weeks, he was running all kind of the deep horizontal, those in-breaking routes, and then he got hurt, and then he's come back, and all he's really done is kind of run those kind of deep fades, kind of try to take the top off the defense. And then kind of in terms of those short and intermediate breaking routes, it's really been Ladd who's kind of taken over that role from Quentin Johnston, and then Gadsden. And then Keenan Allen's kind of in that safer option. You kind of get him in those short yardage situations. And so I just have a lot of trust issues in terms of like who I want to get to in terms of this Chargers side, because it's like it could be one of those things where Quentin Johnston breaks out once again, this week against Tennessee, or maybe it's Keenan Allen, or it's like they have Ladd, or it's like they have Gadsden now, or it's like they have Kamani Vidal. So it's like in terms of safety, I just rather get to Kamani Vidal, who, as you can see, he's been very safe the past 2 out of 3 games, close to 20 rushing attempts, 18, 23, and then he's involved in the passing game as well. So I think that's kind of my take there. But, Gadsden, if you do trust it, I don't mind going to him. He's been great. He's been like Tucker Kraft in terms of that yards after catch. He's been really, really good as a rookie there. Brock Bowers, if he's going to come in at low ownership or no ownership at all, and he's fully healthy, like if there's no limitations, I absolutely love this price tag. And it's kind of hopefully a breakout game for him after a really disappointing season due to that injury. Once again, I think George Kittle is priced a little bit too low here in this matchup, especially if there's Brock Purdy back. We've seen George Kittle have some monster games there, so I really like him. Moving on down a little bit more, some cheaper options. Dalton Kincaid there with Josh Allen. Once again, it's just hard to trust the pass catchers for the Bills, but if they're down, they should throw the ball a ton. He'll be heavily involved. I don't mind going down here a little bit more to Colston Loveland. If Kmet is out, he saw 5 targets. Going to be running a ton of routes, pretty cheap. Otherwise, that's really it. I don't think there's a need to get to any of the super cheap tight ends as of right now. There's just a lot to like here in terms of the top guys. But in terms of filling out the rest of this lineup, let's just do defense real fast. Let's see here at the bottom who we can kind of punt to as of right now. I don't mind taking a shot on the Raiders defense. Max Crosby going against Jacksonville, a team that's been very up and down. Falcons look interesting a little bit. Yeah, let's go with the Raiders for now, going against Jacksonville. And then we have 39 left over for tight end, which I don't love. Could get to Evan Ingram there. He's been involved. It's kind of a shoulder shrug. Hunter Henry, I think maybe he'd be my favorite. Or maybe you could get to Dalton Schultz, even if Nico Collins, Christian Kirk are back. I do think it might help out Dalton Schultz not being kind of that main priority of the defense and kind of open up things for him there. You take a shot on Hawkinson or Colston Loveland. So I'd say let's just go to Colston Loveland in a game that, targeting a really bad defense. He should be heavily involved in the passing game. I think this is a fine, first look build. You get Patrick Mahomes, a stack with, Brashad Smith, the value running back with no Pacheco, as well as Rashee Rice. You don't have to do a bring back, but you could if you wanted to. We get to Kamani Vidal in a smash spot against Tennessee there. Puka, obviously too cheap there, just in his role going against the Saints. We get Jameson Williams buying low on him after a very, very bad game there and kind of a bad season overall. If you're not going to this game here, if you're not going to the top two guys in Jahmyr Gibbs or Amon-Ra, it makes sense getting to Jameson Williams, Colston Loveland against that really bad Cincinnati defense. Most likely no Cole Kmet. He looks good. And then Tyrone Tracy Jr. It's kind of that Cam Skattebo play, that role with no Cam Skattebo in the Raiders defense. So I think it's a solid, first look build. Hope you guys like the early look breakdown. As I always say, with the injury news, all this can change by Saturday, Sunday when we want to make your lineup. So stay updated. I will have some other videos come out later this week in terms of who we want to target and why. But yeah, hope you guys like the video. Hit the like button, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in my NBA videos. Peace.